Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world of steam, spice, and the faint clink of ceramic cups. You're winding your way through the narrow cobbled alleys of 16th century Istanbul, where smoke curls up from chimney pots and the air smells like roasted cardamom and warm bread. The moon hangs heavy and pale above the rooftops, watching silently as you turn a corner. And there it is, a low lit coffee house, glowing like a lantern in the dark, humming with quiet laughter and the soft scrape of slippers on rugs. Inside, you'll meet scholars and shoemakers, soldiers and storytellers, all nestled together on threadbare cushions, warmed by thick coffee and thicker conversation. But don't let the calm fool you. These cozy little havens once teetered on the edge of treason, spiritual panic, and imperial bans. Ottoman sultans were wary of these places for good reason. They were more than just cafes. They were theaters, libraries, salons, spy rings, and sometimes even shelters for stray cats who refused to leave once they'd tasted rosewater. You probably won't survive this world for long, honestly. Not unless you know when to speak, when to sip, and exactly how long to stare into your coffee without starting a philosophical debate about fate and foam. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what time is it in your corner of the world? Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open the door and step inside. There's no menu. No barista yelling names, just the low aroma of dark roast and the quiet murmur of a dozen tired men trading verses from Rumi under their breath. You find a corner where the light from an oil lamp falls just so, soft enough to keep secrets but bright enough to see who's watching. A small bearded man in a woolen robe glances up and nods as if to say, "Yes, this is your spot." It always was. The first thing you notice, no chairs. The second, no rush. You lower yourself onto the soft pile of rugs that cover the floor like a quilt made by 10 generations. There are slippers arranged neatly along the walls, each one pointing outward, ready to be claimed again. A wooden tray is placed before you silently, as if by magic. On it, a porcelain cup no larger than your palm, filled with a dark, unblinking pool of coffee. No milk, no sugar, no stirring. The man beside you raises his own cup and mutters something that might be a blessing or just a complaint about the weather. Either way, you nod. That's what people do here. Nod, sip, and listen. Historians still argue whether the first Ottoman coffee houses were purposefully political, or if the politics brewed themselves slowly like the drink. What's agreed upon is this. By the mid-1500s, these establishments were spreading across Istanbul like cozy little fungi. The first major coffee house opened near the Tahtakale district, and from there, the idea caught on like saffron in boiling water. They didn't just serve coffee, they served pause, reflection, subtle rebellion in the form of heated debate over sweetened bean juice. And let's be clear, this coffee was not your gentle French press. It was bold, unfiltered, and strong enough to make your soul blink twice. You glance around. A man leans against a brass samovar, his face lost in the steam. Another hums a lullaby to no one in particular. Somewhere behind a curtain, someone coughs softly and then mutters a prayer. The air is so thick with scent, burnt sugar, clove, charcoal, that you wonder if you'll ever be able to breathe without craving coffee again. The Ottomans didn't invent coffee, of course. That honor belongs to Yemen, where Sufi mystics used it to stay awake during long spiritual vigils. But the Ottomans were the ones who turned it into a lifestyle. They developed the elaborate brewing process, grinding the beans to powder, boiling it over open flame in long-handled pots called sezve, and serving it unfiltered so the grounds settle like sleepy thoughts at the bottom of your cup. You take a sip. It's bitter, almost medicinal, but not unpleasant. Like a truth you didn't want to hear but needed to. Beside you, a man slowly folds a piece of parchment and slides it into his robe. Across the room, two elders argue about poetry in hushed tones. One slaps his knee, the other rolls his eyes. No one seems angry. You get the sense that nothing in this place ever escalates above a raised eyebrow. Outside, the city simmers. Markets closing. Minarets silhouetted against the stars. The Bosphorus lapping gently at stone walls. But in here, you could be anywhere. The Ottoman Empire stretches across three continents. And yet, in this tiny cafe, the whole universe feels like it fits into a porcelain cup. Another sip. The warmth moves through you slowly, like someone placing a heavy blanket over your thoughts. You notice a small tray of delights passed from hand to hand. Dates, pistachios, perhaps a sliver of locum if you're lucky. You're not offered any yet, but that's all right. They're waiting to see if you stay. And you will. You're already part of the ritual. The light flickers as someone opens the door. More slippers, more quiet nods. The room adjusts itself around the new arrival like a living thing. You're no longer new. You're part of the atmosphere now. And as you raise your cup again, you realize something odd. You're not even sure how long you've been here. Time, like the sugar in the air, has dissolved completely. The first rule of the Ottoman coffee house you quickly learn is that your boots are not welcome. It's not personal. Everyone leaves their footwear at the door. Embroidered slippers line the entrance like a museum of tired feet. Your dusty, travel-worn boots look wildly out of place beside the delicate leather babouchis and soft-soled sandals that lounge by the threshold like sleepy cats. A man with a gentle mustache gestures wordlessly toward a small woven mat. You kneel, untie your laces, and shuffle your boots aside. In return, he offers you a pair of mismatched slippers, one slightly more polished than the other. You slip them on. They're warm from the last wearer, possibly a scribe, maybe a poet. Who knows? The slipper ritual isn't about hygiene, not really. It's about softness, about leaving the street behind. The clamor, the grit, the tension. You step forward not just in new shoes, but in a new role. That of the careful observer, the temporary companion, the silent co-author of the evening's rhythm. Inside, the floor is layered with carpets. Woven kilims in hues of rust and deep blue. Some frayed at the edges. Others so pristine, you suspect they're newer than they look. The effect is immediate. Your footsteps vanish. Everyone's do. It's like the room is designed to swallow noise whole. You shuffle to your usual corner. Yes, you already have one now, and lower yourself onto the cushions. You're more graceful this time. Your host, who still hasn't spoken, gives you a small nod of approval. It's not a cafe in the modern sense. There's no counter, no espresso machine, no Wi-Fi password scrawled on a chalkboard. What there is, though, is a kind of choreography, a ritualized stillness. People don't shout here. They murmur. They pass trays with two hands. They smile with their eyebrows. And the etiquette, stricter than a sultan's wardrobe. Take, for example, the way your coffee is delivered. It arrives again, silent, steaming, perfect. The cup rests on a small saucer lined with silver filigree. You must wait. Always wait a moment before touching it. Let the person serving it move away. Let the air settle. Only then do you lift it gently with two hands if possible. One hand is for haste. Two is for honor. Historians still argue whether these customs were born from religious modesty, imperial flair, or simply the human desire to slow everything down. Probably all three. Ottoman culture wasn't in a hurry. Not when it came to conversation. Certainly not when it came to coffee. As you take your first sip, richer this time, the sesve was scrubbed with cinnamon. You overhear a debate in the next circle of cushions. It's about slippers. Specifically, The color hierarchy of indoor footwear. One man insists green is reserved for scholars. Another snorts and claims only Sufi poets wear green indoors and only on Thursdays. You're not sure if they're serious or inventing new etiquette as they go. That's part of the fun here. The rules are rigid, but often invented on the spot, passed down like family secrets no one remembers creating. Someone spills a drop. Just one. Everyone pauses subtly. The host glides over with a square of linen. No words. Just a nod. Spilling isn't a sin. It's an omen, a reminder to be more present. Or, if you're superstitious, a sign that someone somewhere is thinking of you. Hopefully not your landlord. A small boy appears carrying a tray of sugar cubes. You take one. Not to sweeten your drink. It's too late for that. But to chew between sips. It offsets the bitterness. He offers a smile that's practiced, proud. He's clearly someone's nephew learning the trade. In some cities, these boys are trained like apprentices, not in brewing, though that comes later, but in the art of knowing who sits where, what time the regulars arrive, which customers prefer silence, and which will launch into a 10-minute anecdote about a horse that stole a watermelon. You get the feeling this boy knows all your secrets already. Back in your corner, a pair of older men have begun comparing slippers. One claims his were a gift from a judge. The other says his are handmade by a widow in Bursa who only works under full moons. Both nod as if this is perfectly normal. It's easy to laugh at first, but after a while you realize it's not about the footwear. It's about the care, the ritual, the respect for space and softness. In a city of clamor, the coffee house is the only place where your soul can exhale. Even the way people sit is coded. Legs tucked to the side, polite, thoughtful, crossed ankles, informal, perhaps disrespectful, sprawling across 3 cushions, reserved for poets or madmen. You hear whispers of a man who once entered a cafe barefoot, claiming he had traded his slippers for a single line of Hafiz. He was either revered or never allowed back, depending on who tells the story. Outside, the call to prayer weaves its echo across the rooftops. No one moves, not because they're disrespectful, but because this too is prayer, a kind of worship, the reverence of stillness, the holiness of hush. Your cup is nearly empty again. You try to resist looking, but there it is, the swirl of grounds at the bottom. Not quite a shape, not yet a sign, but it's watching you, waiting to be read. You place the cup back on its saucer with deliberate care. That's the other unspoken rule. Cups aren't clinked down. They're returned like a farewell. And though you don't yet know it, those grounds will return later. Read by someone whose predictions are either poetry or performance art, depending on your mood. For now, you simply adjust your slippers, shift slightly on your cushion, and prepare to listen to the next story drifting your way, wrapped in steam, steeped in centuries. Somewhere behind the brazier, a new sound enters the air. It's subtle at first, just the faint tap of wood on wood, like the warm-up shuffle of an instrument. Finding its voice, you look up, and sure enough, the old man in the corner is adjusting his ney flute, setting it carefully on a velvet cloth beside a string of beads and a small pouch that probably holds either tobacco or pistachios, depending on the hour. There's no official stage in an Ottoman coffee house, no spotlight, no announcements. Performers emerge the same way the coffee does, unrushed, inevitable. Tonight, the ney player is joined by a skinny man with a lute-like ODD, his turban slightly askew, and the grin of someone who knows his fingers are faster than your thoughts. These musicians aren't here to dazzle. They're here to lull. The melody that follows is slow, syrupy, and hypnotic. Notes rise and fall like breath, plaintive, circular, a lullaby for a city that never really sleeps. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you forget you're a time traveling guest in a room of long beards and low ceilings. You're just one more listener among many, letting the sound unspool your tension like thread off a loom. Historians still argue whether music in these coffee houses was an everyday affair or more of a weekend indulgence. Some say certain sultans frowned on it entirely, fearing it would distract from religious focus. Others point out that even the devout Mevlevis, yes, the whirling dervishes, used music as a form of divine meditation. It seems the coffee houses leaned into that ambiguity. After all, what better place to hide your spiritual unrest than inside a catchy tune? The ney player pauses between breaths, then murmurs something to a boy who disappears behind a curtain and re-emerges with a plate of quince jam and white cheese. This is how payments sometimes happen. Not in coins, but in small, edible favors. Your mind wanders briefly. Could you own a song with just a plum? Music in Ottoman cafes isn't loud, and it never begs for attention. It's like furniture, comforting, present, but unassuming. Some nights it's just a single reed flute. Other times it's a full ensemble, drum, oud, qanun, even a small group humming Sufi poetry to the rhythm of their fingers tapping on low brass cups. The songs vary. Some are epic tales, full of doomed love and long journeys by camel caravan. Others are satirical, cheeky jabs at greedy merchants or terrible landlords. One popular verse tells of a man who tried to water down his coffee to save money and was chased by angry uncles through three neighborhoods. The rhythm is so infectious you almost hum along, though you wisely choose not to. You're still new here. Your humming privileges haven't kicked in yet. Across the room, a man begins to recite something. His voice is low, barely louder than the music, but people turn toward him instinctively. He's quoting Fuzuli, a beloved Ottoman poet known for turning heartache into something strangely edible. The lines fall like petals. I drank a cup of sorrow for your love and found it sweeter than rose sherbet. Someone sighs audibly. Another man wipes his eyes, claiming as a small. You're not so sure. The boundaries between music, poetry, and conversation are porous here. One moment you're listening, the next you're part of the chorus. You nod in rhythm, tap your fingers softly on your saucer. The oud player catches your eye and grins again. You've passed some invisible test. Outside, the wind shifts, and you catch the scent of roasted chestnuts drifting in through the slatted window. It mixes with the musk of cardamom and old rugs. A dog barks somewhere far off, but it's a sleepy bark, more of a yawn with ambition. You glance at your cup, empty again, but now you know the routine. You tilt it gently and set it slightly to the left on your tray. Code for, I'm ready for another, but only if you're offering. The boy appears, takes the cup, and returns moments later with a fresh pour. This one smells faintly of cloves, or is that just the music playing tricks on your nose? Musicians in these coffee houses are sometimes professionals, other times just bored scholars who needed an excuse to show off their instrument collection. There's even a rumor of a man who played spoons so well he was invited to the palace, though no one agrees on whether he was ever allowed back. Apparently, spoon solos were divisive. The ney continues its spiral like incense made of sound. You feel it somewhere behind your eyes. It's the kind of music that doesn't resolve, just winds inward until you forget what the beginning was. At one point, someone claps. Just once, everyone freezes. The oud player raises an eyebrow. The offender, a teenager with more enthusiasm than experience, blushes and mimics sipping his cup as an apology. The rules here are unwritten, but everyone remembers them anyway. You begin to wonder, why don't modern cafes have music like this? Why must everything now involve earbuds and playlists made by algorithms? Here, even the silences between songs are curated. Another piece begins. This one faster, flirtier, with a cheeky rhythm that makes your toe tap despite itself. The old man behind you starts snapping along with a cloth fan. It sounds like someone politely applauding in a library. And just as quickly the music winds down, the oud player sets down his instrument. The knee rests in its velvet sleeve. A moment of perfect stillness lingers, like the air itself is bowing. You don't clap. No one does. You just exhale, collectively, as if waking from a pleasant dream. In the quiet that follows, someone begins to hum a lullaby. You don't know the words, but you recognize the shape of it. The curve of nostalgia carried through sound. The kind of song grandmothers might sing while steeping tea, or lovers might whisper after a long walk home. The musicians rise and stretch. One winks at the coffee boy, who brings them a tray of warm milk and honey. Their fee, perhaps, or just thanks. You return to your cushion, cheeks warm, slippers still on. The night stretches before you like a long, sweet note. You're halfway through your cup when a quiet rustle interrupts your thoughts. Not the music this time, not the scrape of slippers or the sigh of cushions shifting. It's the soft flutter of parchment. Someone has unrolled a scroll. Across from you, a man in a pale yellow robe, too clean to be poor, too threadbare to be wealthy, clears his throat. His beard is dyed the faintest shade of henna, his eyebrows expressive enough to hold court on their own. He begins to read, not loudly, not like an announcer or a preacher, just loud enough for the nearby few to hear. You lean slightly forward. The tale is strange. Something about a merchant who tried to sell coffee beans soaked in rosewater to the Janissaries and ended up cursed by a librarian. There's a camel that speaks in riddles, a governor who insists on being paid in poetry, a ghost that only haunts kettles. You're not entirely sure what the moral is, but it's deeply amusing and oddly comforting. Welcome to the ancient art of hikaye, the Ottoman storytelling tradition. These tales are half folklore, half satire, occasionally one-third fever dream. Sometimes they're drawn from real news events that spiraled into legend. Other times they're pure invention, like someone stirred a pot of metaphors until the lid rattled. Historians still argue whether these stories were performed word for word or improvised nightly. Some claim tellers memorized hundreds of hours. Others suggest most of it was made up as they went, relying on a handful of crowd-pleasing tropes and a gift for mimicry. Either way, the result is always immersive. The storyteller pauses dramatically. Someone slips him a date. He accepts it like an offering, chews slowly, and continues. You realize now this isn't just entertainment. It's etiquette. Listening, true listening, is one of the highest forms of respect here. You don't interrupt. You don't whisper to your neighbor. You don't check the time, even if your candle has burned down to a stub. You just follow the tale wherever it leads, even if it's into the belly of a coffee-addicted sea serpent. Nearby, a young woman writes on a slip of paper. Not notes, poetry. She folds it, tucks it into the handle of her cup, and sends it to the storyteller via the coffee boy. He reads it mid-sentence, nods, and incorporates her line into the tale without missing a beat. The room ripples with quiet appreciation. This is what passes for flirting in an Ottoman cafe. Witty footnotes hidden inside other people's stories. And no, you're not quite bold enough yet to try it. Not until you figure out how to write. Your eyes are like well-roasted beans in Ottoman Turkish without sounding like an agricultural report. The storyteller's voice grows more animated as the tale approaches its peak. There's a duel, of course, between two scholars using metaphors instead of swords. The crowd is rapt. Even the cat curled by the brazier raises its head. And then a twist. The merchant was the librarian all along. The camel, a figment of his conscience. The riddle, a pun involving coffee grounds and destiny. It makes no real sense and somehow makes perfect sense. Applause? Still no. Just a quiet Masha Allah from the corner and a fresh cup of coffee handed to the teller like a tip in the form of steam. You sip your own drink. Now lukewarm but still comforting. The storyteller catches your gaze just for a second and raises one eyebrow as if to say, "You following all this?" You nod. He smiles, then turns his scroll upside down. "A joke? Maybe." Then he begins again. This time, a tale involving a palace cook, a stolen nutmeg, and a janitor who insists he once wrestled a lion for coffee rights. It's part soap opera, part culinary history, part dream journal. Historians suspect many of these tales originated with Medas, the street performers of Istanbul, who could slip into 10 different characters in one breath. These coffee house storytellers may have been their quieter cousins, less theatrical, more conversational, but make no mistake, they held power. A good story could change your evening. A great one could change your standing in the room. You glance around. A new cup arrives beside you, unbidden. Someone must have ordered a second for you. A small gesture, a quiet welcome. No words exchanged, just steam and kindness. The storyteller winds down. His final lines are soft, reverent, not moralistic, just suggestive, as if every tale is a doorway and he's leaving it open for you to wander through on your own. You sit in the hush that follows. It's not awkward, it's sacred. Then, in the far corner, someone sneezes. Alhamdulillah, murmurs three people in automatic unison. The spell is broken, but the warmth lingers. You stretch your legs, quietly, cautiously. Your foot brushes the edge of someone's cushion. A quick smile of apology, a wave of forgiveness. This place teaches you to move slowly, not just with your body, but your ego. The coffee boy passes again, this time offering little squares of Turkish delight dusted in powdered sugar. You accept one, and it nearly melts on your tongue. Rose flavored, a soft punctuation mark at the end of the story. The storyteller folds his scroll and tucks it into a cloth satchel. A young man approaches, bows slightly, and asks if he might try a story next week. Permission is granted with a shrug and the words, "If the coffee agrees with you." It's not about competition, it's about rhythm. The right tale, in the right room, at the right time. You realize that here stories aren't performed, they're brewed. It's well past midnight now, but the air inside the coffee house hums with a kind of timelessness. There are no clocks here, at least not ones anyone bothers to look at. Instead, time is measured in cups drained, stories told, and the length of candle wax left to burn. You've started to notice the little rituals, tiny gestures that pass between regulars like a secret handshake. A man in the far corner always taps the rim of his cup twice before sipping. Another folds his napkin precisely into a triangle, not to be neat, but to signal he wants silence while he thinks. None of this is codified, yet everyone seems to understand it intuitively. The place has its own language, non-verbal, fluid, and somehow warmer than words. Tonight's candlelight casts soft shadows across the mosaic tiles, catching on the flecks of brass inlaid into the tabletops. You trace a pattern with your fingertip, a curling vine motif that seems to dance the more you stare at it. Every inch of this place is meant to calm the eye, slow the breath. A new aroma rises behind the counter. Not coffee this time, but something sweeter, denser, mastic and honey. Someone has ordered a salep, a thick velvety drink made from orchid root. The drink itself is warm and gently sweet, but the real joy is watching it poured, slow, ribboned, with a dusting of cinnamon so theatrical it should come with a drum roll. Salep is only served in colder months, and only by certain shops that can get the real stuff. You lucked out tonight. The coffee boy carries a tray of it through the room like he's balancing liquid treasure. Each cup is shaped like a tulip and has the faintest crackle of hand-fired glaze. Historians still debate whether Ottoman coffee houses were the original co-working spaces or just elegantly lazy lounges. Some argue that poets and scribes got serious writing done here. Treatises, plays, even tax reforms. Others think that's romantic nonsense, claiming the ambient noise and constant refills made productivity impossible. Perhaps both are true. After all, sipping coffee in slow motion and scribbling passionate footnotes don't have to be mutually exclusive. Across the room, a quiet exchange takes place over a game of tavla, backgammon to the untrained eye, the clack of dice, the strategic frown, the gleeful chuckle of someone who knows they've set a trap 5 moves in advance. It's more than a game, it's social choreography. You never raise your voice, never gloat, never slam the pieces. A good player moves like a calligrapher, measured, graceful, faintly smug. You watch for a while, trying to absorb the rules, but the real skill seems to lie in distraction. One man is clearly losing, but manages to keep his opponent in stitches with a story about his cousin's goat getting addicted to roasted chickpeas. A distraction tactic, maybe, or just another layer of the night's entertainment. Then come the smokers. Not rowdy, not rushed. These are connoisseurs, devotees of the Najil, the water pipe. Each one is assembled with precision. Hot coals arranged with tongs like puzzle pieces, the bowl filled with tobacco steeped in molasses, mint, or occasionally tamarind. You can hear the faint gurgle as someone draws a long breath through the hose, exhales slowly, and fills the room with a cloud that smells like roasted apples and old sandalwood. You're invited to try it, of course, not pressured, just offered. You hold the mouthpiece gently as if it might break or sing. The smoke is surprisingly cool, more of a mist than a burn. It curls in your throat like a secret and exits with a sigh you didn't realize you'd been holding. By now, you've realized something. The coffee house isn't just a place, it's a tempo. Every city has a speed. Paris flickers like candlelight. New York stabs like a drumbeat. Tokyo whispers in neon. But Ottoman Istanbul, at least inside its coffee houses, moves like a lullaby. Even the arguments sound like bedtime stories. A discussion begins near the stove. Two elderly men, one with a walking stick, the other with a belly that has clearly won every tavla tournament it's attended, debate the merits of goat's milk and coffee. One swears it brings clarity to the mind. The other insists it causes dreaming. Neither is particularly concerned about being right. They just like the rhythm of the disagreement. Another customer chimes in, referencing a 17th century scholar who apparently brewed his coffee with crushed clove buds to ward off Nerkakim melancholia. This is disputed by a man polishing his cane who swears the same scholar died mid-sip. More laughter, more claims, more stories, and not a single voice raised. This too is etiquette. Argument as sport, not war. You're allowed to disagree here, but only if you do it poetically. You stretch only mildly stiff. Somehow, even hours into the evening, your cushion still feels supportive. A miracle? Not exactly. Ottoman cafe cushions are serious business, stuffed with horsehair or wool, covered in tightly woven cotton, built to withstand the weight of both philosophers and fidgeters. Even your spine feels grateful. Someone offers you a candied apricot, stuffed with walnut and dusted in rose sugar. It's too pretty to eat, but you do anyway. It tastes like a tiny sunset. In a quiet moment, you realize you haven't looked at the door once all night. You don't care who comes or goes. You're not waiting for anything. You're just here. And here it turns out is enough. The cat returns. Same one as before, or so you assume. Grey with pale stripes, fur slightly matted from too many alleyway naps. It slips between cushions like smoke, pausing only to sniff at the rim of your cup. You nod politely. It ignores you, which feels like the correct response. This isn't a pet. It's a regular. Possibly the true proprietor of the establishment. Every coffee house has one, sometimes two. Felines who drift in like ghosts, survey the clientele, then settle atop the warmest lap or the softest cloak. You scratch just behind its ear. It permits exactly 3 seconds of affection before vanishing again, likely off to inspect the brazier. In the corner, someone has started to sing. No instruments, just a low, almost conversational melody. You can't quite make out the words, but the tone feels wistful. Maybe a folk song. Maybe just a string of syllables made to sound like yearning. The room doesn't applaud or hush, it simply listens. You begin to understand something peculiar about these coffee houses. They're not meant to dazzle you, they are meant to absorb you. Like warm water or a slow fog, you don't arrive to be entertained. You arrive to disappear gently into the evening. This particular coffee house is near the Galata district, where travelers, scribes, and sailors often pass through. Every third customer seems to know at least 2 languages. Overheard snatches of conversation drift through the air: Arabic, Greek, Armenian, Ladino, Turkish, and a few heavily accented attempts at French. No one bats an eye. Polyglot gossip is a common background hum here. It's entirely possible to sit beside someone for hours, speak no shared language, and still leave with a warm nod and an inside joke shared over spilled sugar. You hear one customer explaining a new style of brewing he saw in Cairo: sand-heated pots with cloves and a bit of dried orange peel. Another boasts of a cafe in Damascus where the coffee is so thick you can stand a coin on top of it. This is mostly false, but no one bothers to correct him. Somewhere between the singing and the multilingual debates, the air begins to carry something richer. Yes, still coffee, but this time spiced with cardamom and maybe a whisper of pepper. The scent folds over you like a wool shawl. You catch yourself yawning, and that's when it happens. A small group, 4 or 5 people, begins what can only be described as a poetry duel. No, really. One man, balding, thin-voiced, recites a line about the moon's reflection in his coffee cup. A second replies instantly, rhyming something about liquid dusk and cinnamon fog. It escalates from there. No yelling, just sharp couplets launched like arrows wrapped in silk. You watch, fascinated, as others begin to gather and nod approvingly at clever turns of phrase. Someone scribbles one line down for later. Someone else chuckles and mutters, "Stole that from Rumi. I'm sure of it." Historians still argue whether these poetry duels were formal contests or spontaneous flirtations with language. Some believe they originated in palace courts before drifting into the coffeehouse scene. Others argue that merchants and travelers started them first as a way to pass time on long caravan routes. What's certain is that in the Ottoman world, poetry wasn't reserved for scholars and sultans. It was public property. If you had a metaphor and the guts to deliver it with a straight face, you had a seat at the table. You sip again, not even sure which cup you're on anymore. Fourth, fifth, at this point, time is soft clay. You haven't blinked in what feels like hours. And yet, you've never felt more relaxed. A newcomer enters, his cloak dusted with travel, his beard windblown. He carries a lute, which he promptly places on the ground beside him. No performance. Just the unspoken promise that if asked, he might play. He's handed a cup before he even speaks. That's etiquette here. Newcomers are caffeinated before they're interrogated. You only ask questions once the guest has finished half the cup. It's considered impolite to speak to someone who hasn't yet sipped. There's a certain democracy to all this. No one here outranks anyone else once the cushions are occupied. A shoemaker might argue theology with a scholar. A cook might win a chess match against a visiting poet. Status is real, but it's suspended temporarily, the way jackets are hung at the door. You think about modern cafes, the laptop zombies, the hipster playlists, the sterile lighting, and you wonder, what did we lose when we stopped lingering? Because here in this Ottoman nook of softness and steam, lingering isn't laziness. It's an art form. The singing returns. This time a woman's voice, older, cracked like old parchment. She hums something barely above a whisper, a lullaby maybe, or a tune meant only for herself. It wraps around the room like a spell. The cat returns, jumps onto the cushion beside you, sighs deeply. You mirror it. Somewhere behind you, the storyteller has begun again. This time, a quieter tale, something about a barber, a stolen shadow, and a cup of coffee that foretells the future. No one rushes to listen. They simply allow the tale to settle around, the way dust settles in golden light. You close your eyes for just a moment. The hum of voices, the tick of dice on wood, the gentle slurp of thick coffee, all of it weaves together like the faintest lullaby. You are, without realizing it, entirely at peace. The warmth of the room holds you like a well worn blanket. It's almost eerie how comfortable it feels, how the outside world has slipped so thoroughly from your memory. Were there carriages earlier? Markets? You can't quite recall. Now there is only this low lit, eternally murmuring cocoon of steam and upholstery. You hear the soft pop of a coal shifting in the nozzle bowl, followed by the gurgle of another drawer. The sound is practically meditative. You begin to think you could bottle it and sell it as a sleep aid. Authentic Ottoman hookah noise. Volume 1. Someone near the stove is explaining the virtues of drinking coffee slowly, using the phrase, sip, as if the sun might rise from the cup. He's very pleased with himself. His friend grins and mutters, poets, always trying to turn breakfast into prophecy. You've learned that joking in the Ottoman coffee house is another form of hospitality. Not sharp-edged, not sarcastic, just gentle needling, warm as a wool sock. The regulars trade barbs like old coins, polished from use, slightly bent but precious. At your elbow, a small wooden tray is slid your way. A game, it seems. One you haven't seen before. Carved into the wood are small indentations filled with beans. You glance up and a nearby older man nods and gestures. Play. The game is Mangala, a precursor to Mankala. And while you're fuzzy on the rules, the man is patient and kind. He lets you fumble your way through your first round, chuckling every time you accidentally help him win. Strategy, he says with a wink, comes later. For now, you learn how to lose politely. He refills your cup himself, lifting the long-handled sesvi. With a flourish you suspect he's practiced for years. There's a tiny clink as the porcelain touches your saucer. A sound that might be your favorite in the world now. The coffee has changed again. This batch has the faintest hint of damask rose. Not overpowering, just there, like a dream you half remember upon waking. You sip, and suddenly the air smells like April. Some historians insist that such floral infusions weren't common until the 19th century. Others argue that experimental cafe owners had been flavoring brews for centuries, sometimes with petals, sometimes with crushed almonds, and once, supposedly, with ambergris. You try not to think too hard about that one. Across the room, a younger man reads aloud from a small, leather-bound book. His voice is calm, almost hypnotic. A Persian tale about a lost prince who disguises himself as a spice merchant to win the heart of a clever innkeeper's daughter. It's the sort of story that could go on forever, and no one would mind. You shift slightly on your cushion. It's amazing how your body has adapted to this space. This space. Your knees feel fine. Your back is uncomplaining. You realize it's because you've stopped bracing yourself. No honking. No deadlines, no need to glance at a phone. You are allowed, for once, to be fully where you are. Someone passes by with a tray of sweet treats, tiny confections, pistachio halva, chewy lokum, rose petal jam on a biscuit that dissolves the instant it touches your tongue. You accept one. You don't ask what it is, you just trust it will be good. And it is. There's a man near the window who's sketching, not for money, not for praise, just sketching a corner of the cafe, the curve of a ceramic lamp, a cat's tail mid-flick. He doesn't try to be invisible. He just is. Someone teases him gently. You draw better when the coffee's bitter. He nods in solemn agreement, then takes another sip. It occurs to you that no one here is performing. Not really. Not even the musicians or the storytellers. Everyone is just being. And in doing so, they've created something rare. An unspoken contract that says, you're welcome, exactly as you are, for as long as you like. The shop owner finally emerges. Just briefly, a middle aged man in a wool vest with a pen tucked behind his ear and slippers that flap gently as he walks. He checks the stove, offers a single nod, and vanishes again. A king in a kingdom of cushions and clove. You've started to notice the lighting more. Not just candles, but oil lamps nestled into little alcoves, some flickering in colored glass, others bare and golden. Their glow bounces off the tiled floor like honey pooling in a bowl. It makes everything feel older than time, and yet somehow fresher than dawn. Another debate unfolds. This one about the shape of coffee cups. Someone claims that octagonal ones enhance flavor. Another insists that rounded edges promote warmth retention. A third exasperated mutters that it all depends on whether your hands are cold. The truth, of course, is that none of it matters, and all of it does. That's the strange magic of the Ottoman coffee house. It takes the smallest of things, sugar, cushions, cat whiskers, wood smoke, and stretches them out until they become stories, philosophies, games, and songs. And in doing so, it invites you to slow down until you too begin to stretch. You glance at the brazier. The coals are glowing like lazy rubies now, low and mellow. The room smells like warmth and listening. The cat is asleep on someone's sandal. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice whispers, "Why would you ever leave?" Another voice joins in. There was a cafe in Edirne that banned all talk of politics. The group nods appreciatively. Someone else adds, and another that only allowed political arguments between 2 and 3 p.m. on Thursdays. The point is, coffee houses weren't monoliths. They had personalities, rules, quirks. Some cater to dervishes, others to gamblers, others to fishmongers with big opinions, and yet they were united by one sacred principle. Lingering was encouraged. Modern cafes might want you to sip fast, work harder, then leave quietly to make space. But here, in the Ottoman tradition, space was made for you. Cushions were fluffed. Time was softened. Even silence had texture. You lean back again, feeling the cushion mold to your spine. Your legs are crisscrossed, your arms loose, your gaze somewhere near the far lamp. And just then, a waiter, no older than 17, brings over a small dish of cloves soaked in syrup. A palate cleanser, he explains. You nod, chew gently, and your whole mouth lights up like a spiced lantern. Someone beside you offers a riddle. What is bitter in the pot, dark in the cup, and sweet on the tongue? The obvious answer is coffee. But you hesitate. It could also be the coffee house itself. This little den of cushions and candles is not loud, not dazzling, but it's undeniably alive. People come not to escape life, but to taste it more slowly, one warm sip at a time. A new game begins. Shadow puppetry, of all things. The corner lamp is angled just so, and a pair of older men begin crafting shapes on the wall. A dancing bird, a tumbling dervish, a very wobbly elephant. The audience is rapt. Someone adds sound effects, another narrates in mock, serious tones. Historians believe this playful tradition may have evolved from the Karagöz and Hakivat performances, popular puppet duels full of satire, local gossip, and social commentary. Some imams disapproved of them, of course, too rowdy, too irreverent, but the people adored them. And so they survived, flickering on cafe walls century after century. You smile as the elephant attempts a pirouette. The laughter is gentle, non-disruptive, just the kind that shakes off the dust of the day and makes room for one more cup. You find yourself wondering if anything else in life could be structured like this. Equal parts ritual and freedom, quiet and conversation, caffeine and contemplation. Because here, you are not consuming coffee, you are participating in it. A brief gust of wind rattles the window shutters. The room grows quieter, and you realize the singing has stopped. Only the low rumble of voices remains, like a lullaby hummed by the walls themselves. The cat reappears, tail high, and gives the puppeteers a long, judgmental stare. It then curls up on a nearby chessboard, effectively pausing the match for the next 2 hours. no one minds. After all, in an Ottoman coffee house, even the interruptions are part of the charm. You're not sure what time it is. You gave up tracking hours around the second cup, or was it the third? The lamplight hasn't changed much, and the thick pattern on drapes block any hint of sun or moon. But your body has entered that dreamy limbo where it no longer demands answers. It simply exists, light as steam, slow as honey. Someone chuckles nearby. An older woman with silvery hair braided down her back. She is describing, in great detail, the scandal of a coffee house in Bursa that allegedly served coffee with a side of matchmaking. Yes, you heard that right. Young men and women, invited under the pretense of intellectual discussion or poetry readings, would coincidentally be seated next to one another. Platonic chess matches would mysteriously turn into prolonged glances over backgammon boards. And somehow, without anyone ever saying so directly, a handful of these encounters would end in marriage. You're about to laugh when she adds. And it worked better than most parents did. Historians still debate the extent to which Ottoman coffee houses served as informal matchmaking venues. Some accounts speak of stern clerics decrying their moral laxity, while others point out that in a world with limited public social mixing, these cozy conversational spaces offered something surprisingly radical: unsupervised dialogue. You take another sip. The coffee is different again. This one has mastic resin in it, giving it a faintly pine-like sweetness. You can't decide if it tastes like a dessert or a forest. Either way, you approve. The topic shifts again. Someone recalls the time a parrot in a Damascus cafe learned to imitate the call to prayer, poorly and about 40 minutes early every single day. No one had the heart to stop it. The bird lived a long, happy life, confusing everyone within earshot. You're beginning to understand something. These stories, whether absurd or profound, are not interruptions. They are the backbone of the space. The coffee house is not a silent study hall. It's a murmuring river of tales, trivia, dreams, and digressions. You're allowed, no expected, to drift with the current. A man nearby is flipping through an Ottoman almanac, reading aloud fun facts with a kind of sleepy glee. Did you know, he announces, that there were over 600 registered coffee houses in Istanbul by the mid-17th century? Another nods solemnly. And 700 unregistered, he adds. They both grin. It's a common Ottoman truth. The official numbers were always a bit optimistic. Coffee houses were constantly opening, closing, relocating, and reincarnating. They were like mushrooms after a spring rain, suddenly everywhere. Some were big enough to host dozens of patrons, complete with musical performances and food. Others were hole-in-the-wall joints run by grumpy old men with incredible mustaches who brewed only one kind of coffee and refused to serve sugar. You hear about one such grump, known only as Uncle Bitter, who allegedly kicked out anyone who asked for milk in their cup. He would point to the sign over the door which read, "This is not a barn." Section 9. You begin to notice the intricate dance of service around you. The waiters glide between tables, balancing trays laden with tiny copper sesvies, steaming cups, and delicate glass bowls of water to cleanse the palate. Their steps are purposeful yet unhurried, as if they're part of a choreography that has been rehearsed for centuries. You feel almost guilty trying to keep up. There's a certain art to being served that you're only starting to appreciate. The man closest to you, a middle-aged gentleman with a neatly trimmed beard, explains quietly that in the Ottoman coffee house there was an unspoken code for how to behave when served coffee. For instance, when the server placed the cup in front of you, you should lift it with your right hand while your left hand rested politely on your lap or the table. Using both hands was seen as overly eager, even rude, while using the left hand alone was considered disrespectful, a subtle reminder of cultural norms about hand use. He smiles as he adds, "You probably won't survive this if you try to drink with your left hand alone." You nod, slightly embarrassed as you adjust your grip on your own cup. Another intriguing tradition you overhear is that it was customary to take the first sip silently and slowly, savoring the bitterness as a gesture of respect to the coffee maker. Then, the second sip was allowed to be shared with a smile or a brief comment. But loud laughter or boisterous chatter was discouraged until the cup was emptied. Historians still argue whether these etiquette rules were strictly enforced across all Ottoman coffee houses or if they varied widely between urban centers like Istanbul and smaller provincial towns. What's clear, though, is that coffee drinking was never a rushed, solitary activity. It was a carefully paced social ritual. You watch a pair of friends engage in this slow sip dance, their faces softening with every quiet exchange, the steam from their cups curling lazily between them. It's a dance of patience and presence, so different from the modern caffeine grab and go. Suddenly, a waiter approaches with a silver tray holding a small ornate box. From it, he pulls out tiny spoons, each tipped with a cube of sugar. This was another fascinating detail. While sugar was expensive and sometimes rationed, it was considered essential in coffee etiquette to offer it. But rather than dumping it in, the custom was to allow each guest to sweeten their own cup to taste, respecting individual preferences and creating a moment of personal ritual. You take a cube, watching as it dissolves slowly in your coffee, the bitterness softening into a gentle warmth. Nearby, a storyteller begins a quiet narrative about the legendary coffee house patrons who would test their wits in wordplay competitions called tezkire. These were informal poetry battles, often laced with gentle humor and clever jabs. The audience would listen intently, offering soft claps and murmurs of appreciation. It's fascinating how these verbal duels fostered community and intellectual exchange without ever escalating into conflict. You're struck by how much the coffee house functioned as a democratic space where men from all walks of life, merchants, poets, scholars, and even some artisans, could gather and engage as equals. This was somewhat revolutionary for its time, considering the strict social hierarchies elsewhere in Ottoman society. The air shifts subtly as the afternoon wanes. A breeze moves through the open window, carrying with it the scent of jasmine from a nearby garden. The cat stretches languidly, then jumps onto a low wooden shelf lined with well worn books. You glance at the titles, recognizing poetry collections, historical chronicles, and a few volumes on astronomy. You wonder if the presence of books in coffee houses contributed to the Ottoman Empire's intellectual life as much as the coffee itself. Some scholars suggest these spaces were early versions of modern libraries and salons, nurturing the spread of ideas as well as caffeine. A moment of silence descends. You realize you haven't checked your phone in what feels like hours. A minor miracle. Here, in this cozy enclave, time folds and stretches, bending gently around the rituals of coffee and conversation. Someone nearby murmurs a proverb. Coffee is a cup of patience, brewed over time. You sip again, feeling the weight of the day lift ever so slightly. The coffee house is no longer just a place to drink. It's become a sanctuary, a slow, warm embrace in a world too often too fast. Your eyes drift toward a small corner where a group is gathered around a backgammon. The wooden pieces click softly as one player makes a cautious move, the other leans in, eyebrows raised in feigned suspicion. The game is more than just chance. It's a subtle battlefield of strategy, conversation, and occasional friendly taunts. It's easy to see why backgammon became a staple pastime in Ottoman coffee houses. It's the perfect slow game to accompany slow coffee. You learn that these coffee houses were carefully designed for such social interaction. The low tables and cushioned seating encouraged intimacy, while the smoky air and dim lighting created an atmosphere that gently urged you to linger, not rush. The architecture itself, the curved arches, the intricate tilework, the stained glass filtering in lazy colors, whispered a promise. You are welcome to settle in and unwind. One man, a poet by his dress, and the way his hands flutter as he speaks, shares a lesser known detail. In some coffee houses, special cushions were embroidered with tiny pockets to hold coffee beans, which were thought to keep the cushions fragrant and repel insects. A quirky touch, perhaps, but one that shows the care invested in even the smallest details of the space. You nibble on a piece of sugared quince, its soft, tart sweetness a perfect complement to the bitter coffee. It's not the kind of treat you'd find in a hurried modern cafe, but here food and drink combine into a slow sensory symphony. There's a gentle murmur about coffee house regulations. Apparently, in the early 17th century, Sultan Murad IV famously banned coffee, along with tobacco and alcohol, deeming them distraction that encouraged idle gossip and sedition. Yet the ban was nearly impossible to enforce, leading to clandestine gatherings and a sort of rebellious coffee culture. Some say these bans only strengthen the coffee house's role as a space of subtle political discourse. Historians still argue how much political conversation was truly allowed. Were coffee houses genuine hotbeds of dissent, or did they serve more as harmless social hubs? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. A storyteller nearby recounts a tale of a coffee house so popular that its owner employed a coffee cup reader, a sort of fortune teller who interpreted the patterns of coffee grounds left at the bottom of cups. This fusion of hospitality and mysticism added another layer of ritual to the coffee house experience, making each visit a small adventure. You consider the quiet power of such traditions, the way they bind people together with a shared language of gestures, stories, and flavors. Someone starts humming a soft tune, and a few patrons join in, voices low and steady, blending into the ambient noise. The music isn't intrusive, but part of the room's gentle heartbeat. You lean back, eyes half closed, sensing how this culture of slow, deliberate engagement might be a balm for any restless mind. And just like that, you realize the Ottoman coffee house isn't just a place, it's a feeling. You find yourself drawn to the corner where an elderly man is quietly rolling a cigarette, his fingers steady despite the low light. Smoking, you remember, was also a common accompaniment to coffee in Ottoman cafes, though not without its own rituals. The way tobacco was prepared, shared, and consumed mirrored the deliberate pace of coffee drinking. No rushed puffs here. Each drag was slow, purposeful, a moment to savor and reflect. This man you overhear is describing the intricate hierarchy among coffeehouse staff, including the role of the kahvetsi, the master coffee maker. The kahvetsi wasn't just a barista, but a revered figure, skilled in the art of roasting, grinding, and brewing with exacting precision. His reputation could make or break a coffee house. You imagine the pride in his steady hands, the years spent perfecting that signature foam that crowned each cup. It's fascinating to learn that the foam, or kapuk, was more than decoration. It was considered a sign of good coffee and respect for the guest. A cup without foam was almost an insult, suggesting haste or carelessness. The Kavachi would serve the cup with a flourish, often with a small glass of cold water to cleanse the palate before and after. Historians still argue whether this foam tradition was born purely from taste preferences or if it had symbolic meaning, perhaps reflecting the Ottoman emphasis on hospitality and ceremony. You notice a small vase of dried rose petals on the table and recall how floral essences like rose or orange blossom water sometimes flavored coffee or the water served alongside it. These subtle scents layered the experience, turning a simple cup into an orchestration of aroma, taste, and sight. Nearby, two men debate softly about the origins of the coffee plant itself. Was it Ethiopian, Yemeni, The scholarly quarrel is good natured, and they acknowledge that while coffee's birthplace is generally agreed to be the Ethiopian highlands, the Ottoman Empire played a crucial role in popularizing it across continents. You're amused by the idea that some early European visitors described Ottoman coffee houses as schools of vice or dens of sedition, all because of the animated conversations inside. Yet the people drinking there were often just enjoying poetry, chess, and a good cup of coffee, although you suspect there was always a bit of harmless gossip to spice things up. A waiter glides by with a tray holding tiny brass coffee grinders. You watch as a young apprentice demonstrates the old fashioned method, slowly crushing roasted beans between metal teeth, filling the room with that rich, deep scent. The ritual of grinding was almost as important as brewing itself. You glance out a nearby window. The light is fading, the sky turning a soft apricot hue. Evening is creeping, and the coffee house takes on a different character. A quiet, cozy refuge from the cooling air. Someone pulls out a saz, the long necked lute, and starts strumming a gentle melody. The notes float lazily through the room, mingling with the murmur of voices and the occasional clink of a cup and saucer. You realize the coffee house wasn't just a place for caffeine. It was a stage for music, storytelling, philosophy, and friendship, a slow dance of senses and stories. And somehow, in this carefully brewed atmosphere, your mind begins to untangle. The day's worries dissolve like sugar in hot water. Here you are truly present. You notice how the lighting in the coffee house shifts as dusk deepens. Warm oil lamps casting flickering shadows across the wooden beams and colorful tiles. The soft glow adds a layer of intimacy to the atmosphere, inviting you to slow down even further. The ambient sounds, the murmur of conversation, the gentle clinking of cups, the distant strum of a lute blend into a comforting backdrop, the perfect lullaby for your restless thoughts. A slender man in a long robe quietly shares a story about the social role of the Kavehane coffee house. Unlike today's bustling cafes, these places were often segregated by gender, with men gathering to discuss everything from poetry to politics. But intriguingly, some historical records hint at women's involvement in specific coffee related rituals, like preparing coffee at home or hosting private gatherings, though they rarely entered public coffee houses. Historians still argue about the extent of women's participation in Ottoman coffee culture. Were they fully excluded, or did they enjoy their own versions of coffee rituals behind closed doors? The debate reveals much about the layers of social life during the empire's height. You sip your coffee, noting the slight bitterness balanced by a hint of cardamom, a spice you learned was often added to Ottoman blends. It wasn't just for flavor. It was believed to aid digestion and promote relaxation, making coffee both a pleasure and a gentle medicine. Your attention shifts to a nearby shelf, filled with small, hand painted ceramic bowls and copper coffee pots. Each item carries a story, some passed down through generations, others crafted by artisans who specialized in making the perfect coffee utensils. These objects weren't merely functional, they were symbols of hospitality and status, treasured and carefully maintained. You overhear a lively discussion about the introduction of coffee into European courts and how Ottoman coffee culture influenced royal rituals far beyond the empire's borders. The notion that European aristocrats eagerly adopted and adapted Ottoman coffee customs adds a fascinating layer to the story. Then there's the curious custom of the coffee fortune reading, or effol, practiced by some patrons who believe that the patterns left in their cups could reveal glimpses of the future. You watch a man tilt his cup, peering intently at the dark rounds clinging to the sides, while a friend offers a whimsical interpretation. It's a reminder that even in these serious social spaces, there was always room for playfulness and mystery. The scent of roasting coffee beans mingles with a subtle hint of jasmine from the nearby courtyard, creating a sensory harmony that feels both grounding and uplifting. You find yourself breathing deeper, savoring the moment. As the night grows deeper, the conversation slow, voices softening. The coffee house, once a lively hub of debate and song, now becomes a quiet sanctuary where stories linger like the last sips of a perfect brew. You realize that this cozy Ottoman ritual is not just about coffee, it's about connection, patience, and the simple joy of slowing down together. You lean back, eyes half closed, feeling the comforting embrace of this centuries old tradition settle over you like a soft, warm blanket. The room feels cooler now as a gentle evening breeze drifts through the open windows, carrying with it the scent of cedar and distant sea salt. The subtle shift in temperature seems to invite a natural slowing, the kind that encourages you to lean back and watch the quiet rhythms around. Across the room, a group of men engage in a low voiced game of chess, their pieces moving with careful deliberation, mirroring the unhurried pace of the coffee ceremony itself. You catch a whisper of an old custom where players would pause between moves to sip their coffee, using the moment to think not only about strategy, but to engage in soft spoken conversation. The game was less about winning and more about companionship and mental exercise. An elegant way to pass time in a world that didn't yet know the rush of modern life. A waiter approaches with a small copper tray, presenting a new treat, lokum, or Turkish delight. The sticky, rose scented cubes offer a sweet contrast to the bitter coffee, and you take one with a grateful nod. It's a reminder that Ottoman coffee culture was not just about the drink, but about the full sensory experience. Taste, smell, sight, and even texture all working in harmony. You overhear a debate about whether coffee houses encouraged more intellectual discussion or simply offered a comforting escape from daily life. Some historians argue that these venues were crucibles for revolutionary ideas and political dissent, while others suggest they functioned mostly as benign social clubs. The truth is probably a blend of both, shifting depending on time, place, and patrons. Nearby, a young poet recites a few quiet lines, the soft cadence blending with the crackling of a small fire in the heart. His words evoke the fleeting nature of pleasure and the beauty of simple moments, fitting themes for a space built around savoring slow joy. You notice how the furniture itself encourages relaxation, low wooden tables, plush cushions, and dividers made of intricately carved wood that create intimate alcoves. The design promotes both community and privacy, allowing you to feel both part of something larger and gently tucked away in your own space. The aroma of fresh coffee mingles with a faint hint of incense burning somewhere deeper in the building, adding a meditative layer to the atmosphere. You imagine how these scents might have contributed to the calm focus patrons sought, a sensory lullaby to quiet the mind. As you watch a cat weave between chairs and curl up by the hearth, you recall tales of coffeehouse cats being unofficial mascots, silently overseeing the proceedings and providing quiet companionship. You find yourself drawn deeper into this world where every detail, the architecture, the customs, the sounds, works together to craft a slow, comforting ritual. It's a place where time doesn't push you forward, but invites you to simply be. And in this gentle stillness, you feel the city's heartbeat, slow to match your own. A low murmur swells as the evening deepens, voices blending into a calm hum that wraps around you like a soft shawl. The coffee house feels more like a living room than a public space now. Warm, familiar, and quietly alive. You notice a group clustered near the back, where a man skillfully demonstrates the ancient art of coffee grinding with a hand mill. The rhythmic turning of the crank and the soft clatter of beans grinding release a rich, earthy scent that fills the air, grounding everyone in the moment. This simple, slow process contrasts sharply with the instant coffee you might know today. The Ottoman approach was deliberate, grinding just enough for each brew, never rushing. The Kavitsi's hands moved with practiced grace, understanding that coffee wasn't just a drink, but a ritual to be honored. You learn that some coffee houses even had apprentices, young boys trained to master the craft, carrying trays with delicate cups and anticipating the patron's needs before they were spoken. The role was prestigious. Being a kafechi or apprentice meant belonging to a proud tradition, a lineage of hospitality. Nearby, a group debates the curious Ottoman superstition about spilling coffee grounds. Some say it was a bad omen, others claim it brought good luck. You smile, remembering how spills can be seen as tiny accidents or little gift of fate. The ambiguity adds to the charm of the coffee ritual, reminding everyone that life, like coffee, is full of surprises. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were widespread or localized to specific regions within the empire, revealing how diverse Ottoman culture truly was. A storyteller recounts the tale of a coffee house where a poet supposedly crafted verses inspired by the swirling patterns of coffee foam, a moment of creativity born from the simplest act of sipping a warm drink. It's easy to imagine how this space could inspire such quiet genius. Your senses are attuned to the blend of tactile and sensory details. The smooth porcelain of your cup, the warm steam rising gently, the faint clinking of spoons stirring sugar cubes. Each sensation invites slow savoring, a practice that feels almost like meditation. You catch the soft laughter of a group sharing jokes, their tones low and conspiratorial. Humor, you realize, was another ingredient in this social recipe, a way to ease the mind and forge connections. The night deepens, and the coffee house settles into a soft rhythm, less a hub of activity, and more a gentle cocoon where time stretches and bends. You rest back on your cushion, feeling the quiet pulse of tradition flow through you, carrying you softly towards sleep. You notice the fading glow of the lamps reflecting softly on the polished brass trays carried by a waiter making his rounds. The trays hold tiny porcelain cups cradled in delicate filigree holders, each cup releasing a thin ribbon of steam into the warm, fragrant air. The careful presentation reminds you that in the Ottoman coffee house, aesthetics mattered as much as flavor. Every detail crafted to create a moment of calm delight. You learn that coffee houses were often decorated with intricate calligraphy and paintings, sometimes featuring poetic verses or serene landscapes, designed to soothe the mind as much as the drink. This subtle artistry added to the immersive experience, making each visit feel like stepping into a living work of art. Nearby, an older gentleman explains the importance of the kave falle, the practice of reading coffee grounds. Patrons would peer into their empty cups, searching for shapes and symbols, hoping for glimpses of love, fortune, or adventure. It was less about superstition and more about storytelling, a playful dance between imagination and tradition. You chuckle softly at the thought that this centuries-old coffee cup reading could be considered one of the first forms of social media, where friends gather to share tales and interpretations. An early version of scrolling through stories, but much slower and far more tactile. Historians still debate whether coffee fortune-telling was a widespread custom or a niche practice. But it undeniably added a touch of magic to the everyday coffee ritual. Your senses catch the subtle sweetness of a nearby dessert, baklava, its layers of flaky pastry and honey glistening under the lamplight. This treat, you're told, was a common companion to coffee. Its rich texture, a perfect foil to the bitter brew. You overhear conversation about how coffee houses fostered a unique kind of community, one where social classes mingled more freely than in many other parts of society. A merchant could sit alongside a scholar, and a craftsman might share a table with a poet. This mix created a dynamic environment where ideas flowed as freely as the coffee itself. A young musician starts playing a knee flute, the haunting, breathy notes weaving through the air, casting a spell of calm over the room. The music, much like the coffee, invites introspection and slow, deliberate breathing, a gentle invitation to pause. You notice the careful etiquette around coffee serving, cups presented with a slight bow, sugar offered but never forced, and conversations conducted at a volume meant not to disturb but to invite intimacy. The coffee house, you realize, was a place of balance between movement and stillness, conversation and silence, bitterness and sweetness. As you take your final sip, the warmth spreads through your chest, and your mind begins to drift toward dreams, cradled by the echoes of this timeless ritual. A cool night breeze filters in through the open shutters, carrying the faint scent of jasmine from the nearby gardens. The coffee house has grown quieter, voices dipping to whispers as patrons begin to settle into a more reflective mood. You feel the comforting weight of a thick, woven carpet beneath your feet and the gentle softness of cushions arranged for lounging, everything designed to invite relaxation and lingering. You recall learning that the Ottoman coffee houses were among the first public spaces dedicated solely to coffee drinking and socializing, a relatively new concept that spread across the empire in the 16th century. Before this, coffee was primarily a private, domestic affair, brewed and shared among family members. It's intriguing to think that these coffee houses were not just places for drink, but hubs of intellectual life where poets, philosophers, and everyday folk mingled freely. In fact, some coffee houses even had libraries or collections of scrolls and books, inviting patrons to read or debate ideas between sips. You overhear a conversation about the early opposition to coffee houses from certain religious and political authorities. Some feared that the gatherings might encourage sedition or distract from traditional religious duties. This tension only underscores how powerful the coffee ritual had become, a social force wrapped in the humble guise of a hot drink. Historians still argue about how much political ferment actually brewed in these spaces versus how much is legend versus reality. The scent of freshly roasted beans wafts by again, mixed now with the faint aroma of toasted nuts, a common snack served alongside coffee to balance its bitter edge. You nibble on a small handful, enjoying the satisfying crunch and the way it complements the drink's warmth. Your eyes catch a glimpse of a beautifully embossed copper sesve, the long-handled pot used to brew coffee over hot coals. Watching its dark liquid bubble slowly, you appreciate the patience involved in the process. A ritual requiring care and attention, far from the instant gratification of modern coffee machines. Nearby, a group shares a quiet laugh over a tale involving a mischievous coffeehouse cat that once reportedly stole a sugar bowl. An anecdote that seems to have grown in embellishment with each telling, adding a touch of humor to the evening's calm. You notice how the flow of the night encourages gentle conversation, stories told in a slow rhythm, with pauses to savor both words and coffee. The Ottoman coffee house emerges as a place where time bends softly, shaped by the deliberate pace of shared rituals and human connection. As you sit back and breathe in the blend of aromas and sounds, you feel wrapped in a centuries old tradition, one that quietly invites you to slow down and simply be present. You lean closer to a low table where a small group is engaged in a lively game of tavla. the Ottoman version of backgammon. The dice clatter softly, and with each roll, players take their turns with a quiet intensity that never disrupts the overall calm. The game is a perfect pairing for the coffee house environment. Competitive, yes, but played with a steady patience that reflects the slower rhythm of life here. You learn that Tavla was not just entertainment, but a social lubricant, encouraging friendly rivalries and sparking conversations that meandered as leisurely as the game itself. Coffee, it seems, served as the steady companion to all manner of pastimes in the Kavehane. Nearby, an elderly man recites lines from a poem, his voice low and melodic, while the others listen attentively. Poetry and storytelling were staples in these spaces, nurturing a culture of oral tradition that wove history, philosophy, and humor together. You overhear talk about the famous Ottoman poet Fuzuli, whose verses often found their way into coffee house performances, blending melancholy and wit in ways that perfectly matched the bittersweet flavor of the brew. Historians still debate how much influence these informal performances had on the broader literary culture of the empire, but it's clear they provided a vital forum for artistic expression. The delicate clinking of porcelain punctuates the room as fresh cups are served, each accompanied by a small glass of water. A tradition meant to cleanse the palate and slow the pace, giving you time to savor every sip. You notice the careful etiquette. The host always drinks last, a sign of respect and hospitality. The ritual invites a mindfulness rarely found in today's fast paced world. As the night deepens, the conversation turns to more philosophical topics: morality, the nature of happiness, the meaning of life, all gently explored over steaming cups of coffee. You feel the calm wash over you, as if the centuries old echoes of these discussions are brushing against your own thoughts, inviting quiet reflection. The coffee house is not just a place, it's a mood, a shared breath, a moment suspended in time. And in this slow dance of words and warmth, you find yourself drifting closer to peaceful rest. The low murmur of voices blends with the soft clinking of coffee cups, forming a gentle soundtrack that surrounds you like a warm blanket. You shift slightly to notice a craftsman at work, delicately engraved in a copper coffee pot, the sazve, with intricate floral patterns. His steady hands move with practiced ease, turning a simple vessel into a piece of art. Much like the coffee ritual itself transforms ordinary moments into something special. You learn that these handcrafted pots were prized possessions, often passed down through generations, each bearing the marks of countless shared mornings and evenings. Owning a finely decorated sizvi was a sign of pride and taste, as well as a connection to tradition. Nearby, a discussion bubbles about the preferred roast levels of coffee beans. While modern palates often crave darker, more bitter brews, Ottoman coffee was generally roasted lighter, emphasizing delicate, floral, and fruity notes. This lighter roast meant the coffee retained more subtle flavors, encouraging slower sipping and deeper appreciation. Historians still debate how much the roasting process varied regionally within the empire, revealing a rich tapestry of local tastes and customs. You notice a young woman serving coffee with a smile, her movements graceful and deliberate. Though coffee houses were predominantly male spaces, some women played important roles behind the scenes as servers or proprietors. Roles that challenge modern assumptions about gender in Ottoman social life. Nearby, a small group laughs over a playful debate about the origins of coffee. Some insist it came from mystical Sufi rituals, others from humble shepherd legends. The truth may lie somewhere in between, wrapped in folklore and fact. You sip your coffee slowly, feeling the warmth spread through your chest and the slight bitterness balanced perfectly with a spoonful of honey. The combination is soothing, a quiet reminder of how simple ingredients can come together to create comfort. As the night deepens, the coffee house's atmosphere shifts towards silence and soft reflection, inviting you to rest your thoughts and let the gentle ritual lull you towards sleep. A quiet hush settles over the coffee house as the last of the evening light slips away, leaving only the warm glow of oil lamps to cast flickering shadows on the walls. You settle deeper into your cushion, feeling the softness embrace you like a familiar friend. The rhythmic tapping of a master calligrapher's brush on parchment nearby draws your attention. An artist crafting elegant Ottoman script that winds like a flowing river across delicate paper. You learn that coffee houses were not merely places for drink and chat. Many doubled as cultural salons where calligraphers, poets, and musicians gathered to practice and share their crafts. This blend of art and leisure created a unique environment that nurtured creativity and calm. An old man nearby softly recounts a tale of Sultan Suleiman's favorite coffee ritual, how the Sultan insisted on drinking his coffee without sugar, appreciating its pure, unadulterated flavor. This preference supposedly symbolized his straightforward, no nonsense approach to ruling an empire. Historians still argue whether these royal anecdotes are fact or legend, but they add a rich layer to the coffee house mythology. You catch the faint scent of cinnamon drifting from a nearby cup, an addition that some patrons favor to add warmth and spice to their drink. It's a reminder that Ottoman coffee culture was never monolithic. Regional variations and personal tastes flourished, contributing to a vibrant mosaic of traditions. You overhear a group discussing the etiquette of conversation, how certain topics were off limits to maintain harmony, while others were encouraged to spark thoughtful debate. The unspoken rules ensured that the coffee house remained a sanctuary of civility amidst the bustle of city life. Your eyes wander to a tray of simit, sesame-covered bread rings often enjoyed alongside coffee, their crispy texture offering a pleasant contrast to the drink's smooth bitterness. You feel a gentle smile tug at your lips as you realize how these small rituals, sharing bread, savoring spices, listening to stories, create a tapestry of comfort and connection. The coffee house tonight feels like a safe harbor in a vast sea of time, a place where you can simply be, wrapped in the gentle rhythms of tradition. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you carry the quiet warmth of this ancient space with you into the night. You hear the soft scrape of a brush across a ceramic plate as a young artist delicately paints geometric patterns onto a new coffee cup. The shapes are precise, almost hypnotic, drawing your gaze into their steady repetition. You realize that the Ottoman coffee house was as much about beauty as it was about flavor, a place where art and function merged seamlessly in everyday objects. The tradition of decorating coffee cups with intricate designs was both a form of craftsmanship and a subtle way to express status. Patrons often brought their own cups, each telling a story of family, trade, or personal taste. You overhear a conversation about the ceremonial preparation of coffee, a meticulous process involving roasting, grinding, and brewing that could take nearly an hour. This slow pace demanded patience, encouraging everyone present to savor not just the drink, but the moment itself. Historians still debate how much of this ceremony was strictly ritualistic versus practical, but no one doubts it fostered a deeper appreciation for coffee's unique qualities. Near your table, a group shares slices of kazandibi, a caramelized milk pudding with a smoky sweetness that perfectly balances the bitterness of coffee. The dessert's name means bottom of the pot, a playful nod to the caramelized layer created during cooking, a tasty reminder that even leftovers can be delicious. You notice how conversation ebbs and flows like the foam on your coffee, sometimes bubbling with laughter, sometimes settling into quiet reflection. The ebb and flow mirrors the slow dance of the coffee making ritual itself. A storyteller nearby recounts a humorous anecdote about a famous poet who was said to drink coffee to stay awake during long writing sessions, but would inevitably nod off mid verse, only to wake with a start and scribble something unintelligible. You smile, appreciating how the coffee house was a space that embraced human quirks and creativity alike. The warm glow of lanterns and the soft murmur of voices create a cocoon of calm around you as the coffee and company gently carry you toward rest. You sip slowly, savoring this timeless moment of shared comfort. The soft clatter of a wooden backgammon board opens another quiet layer of the evening. The player's hands move carefully, sliding checkers as the dice roll with a satisfying clink. This slow, rhythmic game is a perfect companion to the measured pace of coffee sipping, a form of play that invites gentle focus rather than hurried competition. You learn that backgammon, or tavla, as it's known in Ottoman culture, was more than just entertainment. It was a ritual of camaraderie, where victories were shared with modesty and losses taken with a smile. Coffee houses were as much about social bonding as about the coffee itself. Nearby, a woman's laughter bubbles softly as she recounts a playful story about a mischievous cat that reputedly roamed the coffee house, stealing sugar cubes and causing minor chaos. An endearing reminder that even in the most refined settings, life's little disruptions add charm. Historians still debate how common it was for animals to be part of coffeehouse life, but such tales add warmth and humor to the otherwise stately ambience. You inhale the scent of rose water, faint but unmistakable, drifting from a nearby cup. Rose water was often added to coffee or desserts to introduce a floral softness, balancing the boldness of the drink with gentle fragrance. You watch as a server moves gracefully between tables, balancing trays laden with tiny glasses of cold water, always served alongside coffee to cleanse the palate and refresh between sips. The soft flicker of oil lamps casts dancing shadows on the ornate wood carvings decorating the walls, lending the room a feeling of quiet intimacy. The conversation turns to the practice of sohbet, or friendly conversation, a cherished tradition encouraging polite discourse and the sharing of wisdom, stories, and laughter in equal measure. You feel the soothing flow of the night's rhythms, games, stories, sips of coffee, unfolding in a gentle cycle designed to calm the mind and nurture connection. As your eyes grow heavy, the coffee house wraps you in its timeless embrace, a sanctuary of warmth, light, and gentle community. You stretch out on the soft cushions, feeling the gentle press of embroidered fabric beneath your fingertips. Around you, the steady murmur of voices and the faint hiss of the samovar boiling nearby create a soothing symphony as the coffee house settles into a quieter rhythm. It's the perfect time for a brief pause, one that invites reflection and comfort. You recall that Ottoman coffee houses often served as meeting points for travelers and merchants, places where news from distant lands flowed freely alongside the cups of coffee. The coffee house was, in a way, an early information hub, a social network centuries before the internet. Nearby, a group discusses the silk routes, tracing the journey of coffee beans from faraway Ethiopia through Arabian ports to Istanbul's bustling bazaars. This journey wasn't just about trade, but also about culture, ideas, and the slow fusion of flavors and customs. Historians still argue how much coffee culture was shaped by these long distance exchanges versus local innovation, but the blend is undeniable. You notice a small bowl of dried figs and walnuts on the table, a common snack, pairing sweetness and crunch to complement the rich, slightly bitter coffee. You overhear a softly spoken debate on the curious Ottoman law that once regulated coffee house opening hours, aimed at maintaining public order and preventing too much late night revelry. Though patrons often stretched those limits, the coffee house, you realize, was as much about balancing freedom and control as it was about coffee. A storyteller nearby weaves a gentle tale about a coffee house cat believed to bring good luck to regular patrons, a comforting superstition that softened the edges of everyday worries. You take a slow sip from your cup, the warmth spreading gently as your eyelids begin to flutter. The night deepens, but the coffee house's glow and gentle hum invite you to linger just a little longer, wrapped in the timeless ritual of shared moments. The soft glow of lantern light flickers against the carved wooden panels, cast in playful shadows that dance quietly across the coffee house walls. You feel the slight chill of the evening air slipping in through a slightly cracked window, mixed with the warm scent of freshly ground coffee and the subtle sweetness of lokum, Turkish delight, resting nearby on a small plate. You learn that offering lokum alongside coffee was more than just a treat. It was a ritual act of hospitality that helped balance the bitterness of the brew with sugary softness. This tradition symbolized generosity, creating a sensory harmony between bitter and sweet that soothed both palate and soul. Nearby, a storyteller softly recites a tale about the origin of the word kahvehane itself, which combines kahve, coffee, and hane, house. It's a simple linguistic fusion that hints at the deep integration of coffee culture into everyday life. Historians still debate the exact timeline of when coffee houses officially became part of Ottoman urban culture, but their rapid spread speaks to their magnetic social pull. You watch a group sharing a game of Mangala, an ancient board game involving strategy and patience. Perfect companions to the slow, deliberate process of sipping coffee. A server gently places a small glass of cold water beside your cup, an Ottoman custom designed to cleanse your palate and refresh your senses between sips. The water is clear and crisp, a silent partner to the dark richness of the coffee. You overhear a light-hearted conversation about the quirky punishments once used for coffee house rule breakers, such as minor fines or social shaming, reflecting the importance of maintaining a calm and respectful environment. You smile, appreciating how even these gentle social controls contributed to the overall peaceful ambience. The coffee house tonight feels like a cocoon of tradition, art, and warmth, a perfect place to let your thoughts drift and your body relax. The steady rhythm of quiet voices, the clink of cups, and the scent of sweetened coffee wrap around you like a soft blanket. You take a slow, deliberate sip, feeling the night's gentle embrace drawing you toward rest. The murmur of gentle conversation blends seamlessly with the faint scrape of a quill on parchment as a young scholar quietly takes notes nearby. You notice how the coffee house serves as both a sanctuary for relaxation and a quiet hub for intellectual exchange. It's here that ideas were brewed alongside coffee, stirring minds as much as cups. You learn that many patrons came not only for the rich beverage, but also for the chance to engage in sohbet, the cherished practice of thoughtful conversation and debate, which was seen as a way to sharpen the mind and cultivate virtue. Nearby, an elderly man reminisces about the days when the Meta, the Ottoman military band, would play outside coffee houses during festivals, adding a lively soundtrack that contrasted with the calm interiors. Historians still debate the extent to which these public celebrations influence the atmosphere inside the coffee houses, but the interplay of music and leisure, certainly added layers to the experience. You spot a plate of baklava resting on a nearby table, the flaky layers of pastry dripping with honey, providing a luscious counterpoint to the strong coffee. A conversation begins about how coffee houses served as spaces where poets would compose verses inspired by the brew's bittersweet qualities, blending melancholy and joy in their art. You overhear laughter as a patron jokes about the famous Ottoman custom of serving coffee to guests before marriage proposals. A small cup symbolizing both hospitality and hopeful beginnings. You take a slow sip, noticing how the smooth warmth of the coffee flows down your throat, calming and steadying you. The oil lamps flicker softly as night deepens, and the coffee house's timeless embrace continues to soothe and inspire, inviting you to settle deeper into relaxation. The low hum of quiet chatter fills the air, punctuated by the soft clink of spoons against porcelain cups. You lean back, letting the cushions cradle you, and watch as a coffee server delicately balances a brass tray bearing an assortment of small sweets, dried apricots, candied nuts, and tiny cakes dusted with powdered sugar. You learn that offering a variety of snacks alongside coffee was an important part of Ottoman hospitality, a gesture meant to prolong the visit and encourage leisurely enjoyment. The combination of sweet and bitter flavors created a pleasing balance that mirrored the social harmony sought within these spaces. Nearby, a group discusses the curious history of the coffee houses spread across Europe, beginning with Venetian merchants who first encountered Ottoman coffee culture and carried it back to their homelands. This journey sparked centuries of coffee house traditions far beyond Istanbul's walls. Historians still debate the extent to which European coffee culture was directly influenced by Ottoman customs, but the connections are clear in the rituals and atmosphere. You watch as a man carefully polishes a traditional coffee grinder, an intricate wooden device that turns roasted beans into fragrant powder. The tactile nature of this process is part of the slow, sensory pleasure of coffee making. A light-hearted story circulates about an Ottoman poet who supposedly composed entire odes while waiting for his coffee to brew. His creativity fueled by the drink's gentle stimulation. You take another slow sip of your coffee, feeling the warmth spread through your chest, mingling with a sense of calm and contentment. As the night deepens and the coffee house quiets, you realize you've been gently carried through centuries of culture, ritual, and human connection, wrapped in the comforting embrace of tradition. You settle more comfortably, letting the gentle glow and soft sounds cradle you toward peaceful sleep. You notice the soft rustle of embroidered fabric as a patron shifts in his seat, pulling a well-worn book from his bag, a collection of Ottoman poetry. The rhythmic cadence of verse and the comforting aroma of coffee swirl together, creating a sensory blend that feels timeless. Here, literature and leisure coexist effortlessly. You learn that coffee houses often doubled as informal libraries and performance spaces, where poets, storytellers, and musicians shared their work. These venues nurtured a culture of creativity and contemplation, inviting patrons to drift between attentive listening and casual enjoyment. Nearby, a delicate melody floats from a ney flute, its haunting notes weaving through the air like a gentle breeze. The music complements the steady clink of coffee cups and low murmur of conversations. Historians still debate whether music in coffee houses was spontaneous or more formally organized, but its presence undeniably enriched the atmosphere. You watch as a tray of halva, a sweet sesame-based treat, is passed among a group, its dense, nutty flavor offering a comforting contrast to the sharpness of the coffee. A lively discussion unfolds about the symbolic role of coffee in Ottoman poetry, how the bitter drink often represented life's complexities and pleasures in a single cup. You smile as a storyteller recounts a humorous tale about a poet who attempted to impress a patroness by composing an entire ode in one sitting, only to be distracted by the allure of the coffeehouse cat. The gentle clinking of cups and soft laughter creates a soothing lullaby, wrapping you in a cocoon of warmth and shared humanity. You take a slow sip, feeling the rich, bitter warmth settle in, coaxing your body toward rest. The night deepens, and the coffee house's gentle embrace carries you ever closer to sleep's soft shores. The dim light flickers against the smooth brass of a finely crafted caseway, the small pot used to brew Turkish coffee, as steam curls upward in lazy spirals. You watch the delicate dance of bubbles rising and falling, a soothing ritual that demands patience and rewards with rich aroma and flavor. You learn that the chesway itself was often ornately decorated, turning the act of brewing coffee into a quiet ceremony, a moment of mindfulness in the day's flow. This slow, intentional process encouraged patrons to savor time as much as taste. Nearby, a quiet conversation unfolds about the meticulous art of reading coffee grounds, tasseography, a beloved pastime where fortunes were gently divined from the swirling patterns at the bottom of the cup. Historians still debate whether tasseography was a widely practiced folk art or more of an entertaining parlor game, but its persistence speaks to coffee's role beyond mere refreshment. You catch the faint scent of cinnamon and clove, spices often added to enhance the flavor and aroma, turning each cup into a comforting, fragrant experience. A playful tale is shared about a particularly stubborn coffee pot that once leaked during a sultan's visit, an incident that inspired a gentle joke about patience and perfectionism in coffee culture. You sip slowly, the rich, thick coffee warming you from the inside out as the night settles deeper. Soft murmurs, the occasional clink, and the steady breath of the room create a gentle rhythm, a lullaby woven from centuries of tradition. You feel the cozy embrace of the coffee house wrapping around you, a timeless space where history, ritual, and quiet companionship merge. Your eyes grow heavier, the warmth of the coffee mingling with the softness of the night as you drift closer to peaceful rest. The subtle scratch of charcoal on parchment blends with the soft murmur of voices as a scholar quietly copies notes from an ancient manuscript. You lean back, feeling the gentle weight of history pressing softly around you, carried by the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee and the faint sweetness of crushed rose petals scattered nearby. You learn that coffee houses served as informal centers of learning, where scholars and students exchanged ideas and debated philosophy in a relaxed atmosphere. This blend of leisure and intellectual curiosity made coffee houses vibrant social hubs. Nearby, a group shares a story about the famed Ottoman traveler Evliya Çelebi, who described coffee houses as places where minds meet like cups of coffee. An image that captures the essence of these gatherings. Historians still debate how much influence such travelers had on spreading coffee culture beyond Istanbul, but their detailed observations offer invaluable windows into daily life. You notice a tray of dried pomegranate seeds and nuts, common snacks designed to stimulate conversation and keep energy levels steady during long evenings. A conversation drifts toward the delicate art of brewing coffee just right. Too strong and it overwhelms. Too weak and it disappoints. The perfect balance, a metaphor for life's own challenges. You hear a light chuckle as someone recounts the legend of a coffee house owner who once brewed a batch so strong it reportedly kept patrons awake for days, leading to both admiration and mild exhaustion. Your cup is refilled with a gentle clink, the warmth spreading through your fingers and into your chest. The layers of sound, scent, and conversation weave together into a soothing tapestry, inviting your thoughts to slow and your body to relax. You take a slow sip, feeling the comforting embrace of tradition wrapping around you as sleep begins to beckon. The gentle clatter of tea glasses joins the steady murmur of conversation as the evening deepens. You watch as a waiter delicately balances a tray of tulip shaped glasses filled with steaming herbal teas, a calming contrast to the strong, dark coffee served earlier. You learn that while coffee was the star of the show, herbal teas like Say and Ullamore, linden flower tea, were popular choices for winding down, offering soothing flavors that complemented the lively coffee house atmosphere. Nearby, an elderly man tells a story about how Ottoman coffee houses sometimes hosted meda, storytellers who entertained patrons with humorous and moral tales, bridging entertainment and reflection in a single breath. Historians still debate the origins of meda performances and how central they were to coffeehouse culture. But their enduring presence points to coffeehouses as hubs of oral tradition. You notice a small dish of roasted chestnuts, their warm, nutty scent mingling with the herbal aromas, a seasonal treat to enjoy alongside tea. A playful joke circulates about the coffee snob who insisted his brew be made exactly 3 times before serving, a testament to the passion and pride patrons took in their coffee. You take a slow, warm sip of your herbal tea, feeling the gentle relaxation begin to settle over your muscles and mind. The flicker of candlelight and the quiet symphony of voices create a soft cocoon, perfect for drifting thoughts and restful breathing. The coffee house, now a mix of gentle caffeine buzz and calming herbal infusions, cradles you gently toward a peaceful night's rest. You close your eyes briefly, savoring the mingled scents and sounds of tradition and quiet companionship. The last flickers of lantern light soften against the polished wood, casting a warm amber glow over the tranquil room. You sit quietly, feeling the soft cushions beneath you and the lingering warmth of your final sips of coffee and tea. Outside, the distant calls of night birds mingle with the gentle rustle of leaves, completing the serene soundscape. You remember the intricate dance of rituals you've witnessed, the precise pour, the clink of cups, the quiet exchange of stories and laughter, the delicate balance of bitter and sweet flavors that have accompanied every moment. It's a world where time slows, inviting you to savor not just the drink, but the shared humanity wrapped in each gesture. Historians still debate many aspects of coffeehouse culture, from the role of gender to the extent of political discussions permitted within these walls. But one thing remains clear: these spaces offered comfort, connection, and a gentle refuge from the day's burdens. As the evening winds down, the coffee house becomes a place of soft shadows and whispered goodbyes, where patrons rise slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth and camaraderie. You breathe deeply, feeling a calmness settling into your body, the quiet hum of the room wrapping you like a familiar blanket. Outside, the city's sounds fade into the night, while inside, the gentle ritual of coffee has offered a timeless lullaby. You close your eyes fully now, carried on the soft currents of tradition, story, and rest. Your journey through the Ottoman coffee house concludes here, with the comforting promise of peaceful sleep and dreams as rich as the coffee you've savored.